True Reviews here, and I am in a bit of a nostalgic mood today. So I'm going to take you on an adventure into my own past and show you the top 10 games that I grew up with. Please take into account whilst I'm doing this though, that my gaming experience started after the NES and SNES periods, so unfortunately there won't be too many golden classics on this list. Enjoy! Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. This game for the PlayStation came free with my copy when I finally got my hands on this console. But the second Crash Bandicoot game is where I entered the franchise, and although I actually preferred the third game, this game really did start me off on 3D platformers. Sure, I had Super Mario Land on the Game Boy, but Crash was in 3D, had loads of lovable characters, a bad guy who you couldn't really hate, a hint of media satire, some really impressive level design for its time, and hours upon hours of fun and enjoyable gameplay. I'm still a fan of the series, and it's this game that got me going back in 1998. Command & Conquer Red Alert. I was actually given this back when I was at school as a gift from a friend who was amazed that I didn't own a copy, and soon after installing the game, I understood his astonishment. Command & Conquer Red Alert was amazing, and this was the first RTS game that I ever got, and what a game to open up my RTS experience. This had loads of building options, a simple yet fragile economic system that desperately needed defending, great recruitable units such as Tanya, superpowered weaponry such as the atom bomb and Tesla coils, and funny gaming noises. This game was intense, and one map could keep you playing for hours on end. What was even more amazing was its strong Cold War influences, demonstrated by both the name of the game and the playable factions that are present. Brian the Lion. Okay, so I kind of lied at the beginning of this video, as there was a particular gaming system that I had during the SNES period. Back in the day, we couldn't afford any gaming systems. In fact, the first form of PC we owned was a Commodore Amiga. Of course though, it came with some games, such as Total Carnage and Zor 2. But then there was Brian the Lion, a game that no one else is aware of outside of my family that I know of. If you've played this game, then much love to you. Possibly being the first ever video game that I played, this game simply captivated me. The colours were amazing, the graphics were impressive even for an Amiga, the characters were quirky, with their own unique and lovable personalities, and the length of the game was satisfying. The gameplay itself was also very challenging, taking into account that I was only about 4 or 5 years old at this point, but it opened up my mind to challenging video games. There was nothing not to like about this game. Except for that part on the second world where you could access a secret level, which would lead you to a couple of other levels, and then finally this one level, which had a f***ing brick wall in it which you couldn't pass. Who the hell put that in? I've obviously gone the wrong way, but I can't exit this level, so now I have to reset the game and just not come that way the next time. But apart from that, this game was amazing. Except for the ending too, where the writers seem to be going through some sort of mental breakdown in the middle of explaining what happened to all the other characters. But if you ever get hold of a working copy, then you must play it.
Lane Goodman.
7!
Worms United! The first PC game that I got hooked on, this one gave me months of enjoyment. All of the different maps, the different weapons, worm voices, and even being able to draft your own dream team, this game had it all. Including some funny deaths involving some worms getting blown to shit. Almost everyone loved this game when they first got it, as there was nothing about it that anyone could dislike. With countless hours burned away into destroying a small amount of invertebrates, this game had me hooked for many a day back in the day.
Take me down, 6 underground.
Age of Empires 2: The Age of Kings. This could have possibly been the first game that I played competitively online. The second installment in the Age of Empires series took us away from its Bronze and Iron Age roots and took us up to the Middle Ages. Now hosted with a number of recognisable superpowers from the time, including the Britons, feudal Japan, and the Byzantine Empire, Age of Kings added in more factors into the micromanagement side of the gameplay, and added in some interesting units relating only to certain factions. With an easy to pick up style of play, and the possibility for incredibly long online matches, Age of Kings finally took me away from single player games and introduced me to that scary place known as online gaming. Pokemon Red and Blue. Practically being the same game, with only the exceptions being a few Pokemon being exclusive to one title or the other, this was the one game that I lived by during my early days at secondary school. The fact that it was only available for the Game Boy did not affect how much I played it. In fact, I started taking it to school and played it on the bus, and in lunch breaks, and then again when I got home. The subliminal messaging here that the Japanese have mastered over the years worked like a charm on me as I fell under their spell of having to catch them all. And I bloody did too, though I was a bit let down by one of the most disappointing rewards ever, that being that useless certificate. But then of course I began to play competitively against my friends, and I was pretty damn good at it too. This might have been the first RPG that I lived by, though there was another that we'll get to soon. Mortal Kombat 3! The first, and quite possibly the last fighting game that I really got into, with the exception of Tekken 3 of course. Yep, that's right, I never really got into Street Fighter 2, though I do own a copy of Street Fighter Alpha for the Sega Saturn. Yeah, it was good. But Mortal Kombat 3 just wowed me when I got it back in 1995. The gameplay was gory yet mesmerising, the characters wielding strange and powerful abilities, yet at the same time appearing to be realistic in how they both looked and the way they moved was just awesome. The stages were varied and incredible to look at, and who could forget the fatality moves? There were also animality and babality moves, which didn't work quite well and were more Easter eggs than actual moves. I mean, why would you turn your opponent into a baby when you could just steal their soul? I lived by this game at one point, and in fact I loved it so much that I had memorised the instruction manual cover to cover, and had gone out and bought a walkthrough just so that I could learn all the moves by heart. How sad is that?
It was those 3 words to save my life.
RuneScape! Yeah, this is the one I was getting at earlier. This too was the first and last of this type of game that I properly got into. Though not being the first MMO that I played, Habbo Hotel was the first, and I did play Star Wars The Old Republic for a little while, but after my friends left Habbo Hotel to go play another game called RuneScape, I just followed suit to see what all the fuss was about. And when I finally got there, I saw what all the fuss was about. There was so much to do in this game, and there just weren't enough hours in the day to do it all. The problem with this game though was that if you didn't invest a huge amount of time into it, then everyone else around you would increase their level more and would end up leaving you in the dirt, so you had to keep up. And a lot of your time wouldn't necessarily be spent levelling up. I spent week after week just fishing for lobsters, just so I could make money, so that I could then go out and buy the best stuff. And you know when you've been playing an addictive game, when you waste so much time into it, and not really get anywhere with it, yet you still come back for more. Whilst I didn't really get into the conversion they made for it, mainly because my internet at the time couldn't handle it, I still have fond memories of Rune Classic, and still to this day, I'm wondering where all that time went that I spent on it.
It takes two, baby. It takes two, baby.
Sonic R! And no, the R doesn't stand for rubbish, or retarded, or any other piece of slander that anyone wants to throw towards this game these days. Whilst I'll admit now, playing it recently, it has lost a lot of its charm on me, and Christ, there's so much wrong with this game. But I think I might just have been wowed by the fact that I'd been given a Sega Saturn for my birthday back when it first came out. But this game for me represents a happy time in my childhood. In fact, this was the game that made me want to get a Sega Saturn. Sonic R featured all of our favourite Sonic characters, and even included a load of mech characters from almost all of their counterparts. Now I do recognise that the controls are unforgivable, and the music is so bad that it makes you want to kill yourself, whilst ironically enough being about surviving and getting through the day. I mean seriously, what does it mean when it says, "Can you feel the sunshine?" Along with a soundtrack that forces you to smile out of fear, and some fantastic and bright colours, along with the adrenaline rush of trying to get to the finish line first, Sonic R stood out for me as a major platforming / racing game that I grew up with as a kid. Which means...
One more time, got me feeling so free.
Unreal Tournament! What else? My favourite game, of course. There's a reason why this is my favourite game. And yes, the amount of maps to choose from, interesting and challenging missions and arenas, an arsenal of well-balanced weapons to choose from, easy-to-use controls, best graphics for its time, an addictive and psychedelic soundtrack, tons of playable characters, a tournament campaign, downloadable mods, fast-paced and heart-pounding action, another 1,000,001 reasons that I'll spare you of, does help. But the fact of the matter remains that this is the #1 game that I spent most of my childhood gaming experience on. And to think that I only got into this franchise because I wanted to buy a game from the local store and didn't have too much money, and the only 2 games that I could afford were either the first Unreal or Half-Life, and I went for Unreal, and then later got Unreal Tournament thinking it was the sequel and I wasn't aware of the Return to Napoli mission pack. And to be fair, Half-Life would have also been a good choice. Nowadays, the one game I spent most time on is probably Oblivion, but Unreal Tournament comes in at a close second. And since then, it has always been with me from the moment it came out in stores back in November 1999 all the way to present day. And on that note, this has been True Review's own top 10 games that I grew up with. And I know there were a lot of games that I haven't mentioned that were big at the time, and I got round to those eventually, but hey, this is what I grew up with, and there were some great titles that I missed out on. A few honourable mentions for this list includes Doom, Quake and Metal Gear Solid, and probably some others that I forgot to mention. But if you can feel the sunshine, then likes and Subway sandwiches as always, and follows on Twitter through @true_reviewer, and I'll see you all soon.